My name is Emma Collins, and 3 months ago I buried my father. At the funeral, everyone whispered about his brilliance. His patients praised his steady hands, and my stepmother Monica wept loudly enough for the entire church to hear. I stood there in silence, watching her tears slide down perfectly powdered cheeks, knowing they weren't for him. They were for what she thought she had gained, what no one knew. What I chose not to reveal was the truth my father left hidden for me alone. A second house, a trust worth $3 million, his last attempt at making amends for the years he let me grow up in shadows unseen. So when Monica, cold and triumphant, sneered one morning, "Pack your things. The house has been sold," I didn't flinch. I had already packed. But the things in those boxes weren't mine. When Monica slammed that order into my face, "Pack your things," my mind didn't rush to panic. Instead, it wandered back, as it often did, to the years when she first entered my life. I was only 9 when my father remarried. My mother had passed away from cancer 2 years before, and I was still carrying the raw wound of loss. Into that wound walked Monica, younger, sharper, more glamorous than my mother ever cared to be. She came into our house with her designer handbags and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. From the first night, I knew she didn't see me as family. She saw me as an inconvenience. At first, she didn't have to say much. Her silences spoke louder than words, like when she walked past me at the dinner table to heap seconds onto her own children's plates, leaving mine nearly bare. Or when she praised her son Alex for scoring a single basket in a school game while ignoring the medals I hung in the hallway from my debate tournaments. My father, brilliant but absent thought money, solved everything. He bought me the newest phone, paid for private tutors, and told me, "This should make things easier, Emma." But he never noticed Monica's icy smirks or how she forgot to include me in family photos. I had learned quietly to become invisible in my own home. The only place I felt seen was at my grandparents' cottage 2 towns over. My grandmother's hands always smelled of cinnamon from her baking, and my grandfather never let me leave without listening to at least one of his stories. They reminded me I was more than Monica's afterthought. At their table, I wasn't competing with anyone for scraps of love. Those early years hardened me, but they also taught me patience. I realized quickly that confronting Monica never worked. She thrived on conflict, on making me feel smaller. Instead, I practiced silence, holding my words like a secret weapon. That silence carried me through my teenage years, through the nights when Monica threw parties and introduced her children as my family, leaving my name unspoken. It carried me through the mornings when she tapped on my door with chore lists longer than my homework assignments. And it carried me most of all through my father's slow decline when Monica monopolized the hospital room and I had to whisper goodbyes to him in stolen moments. Now standing years later with her triumphant command echoing in my ears, I felt the old, familiar silence rising again. Not weakness, but strength. Monica thought she was winning. She had no idea she was already living in a house that no longer belonged to her. The will was read in a stuffy office that smelled of old paper and disinfectant. I sat in the back, my hands clasped in my lap, trying to look as neutral as possible. Monica arrived in her usual performance attire, black dress pearls, and an expression of grief she wore like a costume. Her son Alex sat next to her, slouched in his chair with a smirk, while her daughter Sophie tapped endlessly on her phone. The lawyer cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and began. Per Dr. Collins's instructions, the primary residence is to be transferred to his wife, Monica Collins. Monica didn't even try to hide her smile. She pressed a hand dramatically to her chest, as though she had been granted some divine gift. Alex nudged Sophie and whispered something that made her giggle. I kept my face blank, though my stomach twisted. The house, my childhood home, the last place my mother's laugh had echoed, was now in Monica's hands, and she knew it. The lawyer continued listing smaller assets, some bonds, a life insurance policy, the cars. All of it flowed into Monica's column like a steady river. To the outside world, I had been cut out. To Monica, I was nothing more than a guest squatting under her roof. When the reading ended, Monica leaned back in her chair with the grace of a queen. "Well," she said sweetly, "I'll do my best to keep things together for the family. Of course, Emma. You'll need to think about what comes next for you." Her words were sugar-coated, but I felt the venom underneath. She wanted me gone, erased from the picture, just like she had always tried to do. I didn't argue. I didn't even blink. Instead, I let silence be my shield. Because weeks earlier, before my father's funeral, I had met privately with his attorney, Mr. Monroe. That meeting had changed everything. I remembered the way his voice dropped when he slid a sealed envelope across the desk to me. "Your father wanted you to have this, Emma. He asked that it remain private, separate from the will. Inside had been 2 documents, the deed to a second property and the details of a trust worth $3 million. My father's apology letter lay on top, the ink shaky but his words clear. "I know I failed you. This is my way of protecting you when I'm no longer here. Please live your life free of them." I'd read that letter until the paper crinkled beneath my tears. And at that moment in the lawyer's office, listening to Monica's smug tone, I thought of it again. My father had left me invisible on purpose, not out of cruelty, but to keep me safe from her claws. So I stayed silent, silent as Monica gloated, silent as Alex joked, silent as Sophie scrolled. They thought they'd won. But the real inheritance, the true legacy, was already in my hands, and I had no intention of wasting it on revenge. I remember the last time my father asked to see me alone. It was 2 weeks before his health took a sharp turn, a gray December afternoon when snow clung stubbornly to the sidewalks. He had insisted we meet at his office downtown instead of the house. At first I thought it was strange, but I went anyway, curiosity and a flicker of dread driving me. He looked older than I had ever seen him. His once steady surgeon's hands trembled as he poured tea into delicate porcelain cups. "Emma," he said, his voice low, "I need you to listen to me carefully. What I'm about to give you must remain private. No one, especially Monica, can know." I nodded, my heart pounding. He reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a slim folder and a sealed envelope. "Inside is a deed to a second house," he explained. "It's in your name. No one else knows it exists. Alongside it is a trust fund, $3 million. It will be activated immediately upon my passing." I was speechless. My father, who had so often seemed blind to Monica's manipulations, was suddenly revealing a hidden layer of foresight. He had planned something in secret for me. I asked him why. Why not just put it in the will out in the open? His eyes, sharp but tired, met mine. "Because I know your stepmother," he whispered. "If she suspected I was leaving anything for you, she would fight it, drag you into endless battles, poison your future. I didn't want that for you. I wanted you to have freedom." He slid the envelope toward me, his hand lingering. "I failed you in many ways, Emma. I let you grow up under a roof that never felt like yours. This is my attempt to make it right. I hope someday you'll understand." I held the envelope as if it weighed 100 pounds. In truth, it carried more than money or property. It carried his remorse, his attempt at redemption. That night, back in my room, I opened the smaller envelope he had tucked inside. It was a letter, handwritten in his familiar looping script. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. "My dearest Emma, I was never as brave as your mother. She fought for love for family, and I let her slip away. I let you face Monica's cruelty alone because I thought protecting my career was more important. I was wrong. This trust, this house, it's not enough, but it's what I can give you now. Don't waste it on anger. Use it to build the life you deserve." I pressed the letter to my chest, crying silently until the ink smudged against my skin. For years, I had thought my father had chosen Monica over me. In that moment, I realized the truth was more complicated. He hadn't been strong enough to confront her, but in the shadows, he had been trying to protect me all along. That secret, my father's last gift, was the reason I could sit silently in the lawyer's office during the reading of the will. And it was the reason Monica's smug words never broke me. 3 months after the funeral, the house no longer felt like a place of mourning. It felt like a stage where Monica played queen and I played the unwanted guest. She had stripped the living room of every photograph that included my mother. Even the one of me sitting on my father's shoulders as a child vanished from the mantel. In its place, glossy new frames of Monica, Alex, and Sophie smiled down at anyone who entered. To them, the message was clear: I was not part of this family. My days blurred into a routine of small humiliations. Monica would leave chore lists on the kitchen counter, scrub the garage, polish the silverware, wash Alex's basketball uniforms, while her children lounged on the sofa. If I dared to protest, she would tilt her head and say, "You should be grateful you still have a roof over your head, Emma." At dinner, they laughed loudly about vacation plans, restaurants, and shopping sprees. I ate quietly, pushing food around my plate, knowing I was invisible to them. Sometimes Alex would snicker, "Don't choke on the scraps." And Sophie would add, "Don't worry, you'll find a place someday. Maybe a nice little apartment above a laundromat." Their cruelty didn't sting the way it once did because I had a secret. And that secret changed everything. Each night, I retreated to my room where my father's letter lay tucked safely in a box under my bed. I reread it when the weight of Monica's glares threatened to crush me. His words, "Don't waste it on anger. Use it to build the life you deserve," echoed like armor around me. I had already started making quiet preparations. My clothes were folded neatly into suitcases beneath my bed. Important documents, birth certificate, college records were stacked in a folder. To Monica, it looked like I was trapped, too dependent to ever walk away. In reality, I was waiting. Every time she barked at me, every time her children jeered, I smiled faintly. Let them believe they had won. Let them believe they had the power to drive me out. What they didn't know was that the ground beneath their feet was already shifting. One evening, as I cleared dishes from the table, I overheard Monica talking on the phone in the living room. Her voice was sharp, triumphant. "Yes, the market's strong. We'll get at least $1 million for this house, maybe more. I'll have Emma out before the paperwork is signed." My hands tightened around the plate I was holding. So this was her plan. Sell the house, pocket the profit, and toss me aside like yesterday's trash. I carried the dishes into the kitchen, setting them down carefully, forcing my hands to stop trembling. She thought she was planning her future. She didn't realize she was also planning mine. Because when the day came, I wouldn't be the one packing in defeat. I would be the one standing on solid ground, smiling, ready to reveal what she could never control. It was late on a Saturday afternoon when I finally heard the truth spill out in full. I had just come back from the library, my arms heavy with books, when I noticed voices drifting from the living room. The door was half open and Monica's voice carried sharp and clear. "The realtor says we can close in a month, maybe even sooner," she said, her tone bubbling with excitement. "This place will sell for at least $1.5 million, enough for a down payment on a new house in Silver Coast, somewhere with real class." Alex's laughter boomed through the hallway. "Finally, I'll get my own car right. Not some used junker either. I want a convertible," Sophie chimed in, her voice dripping with glee. "And I'm calling dibs on the room with an ocean view. I've already picked out the curtains." I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand clutching the strap of my bag. My pulse throbbed in my ears as their words washed over me. They weren't just selling the house, they were selling my home. The last place where my mother's memory still lingered, where my childhood echoes clung to the walls. Then Monica's voice cut through, colder than glass. "And as for Emma, she doesn't belong here. Once the papers are signed, she's gone. Back to her grandparents or some rundown apartment. She has no say in this." The words should have hurt. Years ago, they would have left me in tears, desperate for my father to step in to protect me. But now they only fueled a quiet, burning resolve. I pressed my back against the wall and listened as Alex and Sophie laughed, already planning their shiny new lives. Blind to the truth. Monica thought she was holding all the cards. She didn't realize the game had already shifted beyond her control. I thought of the trust of the second house already in my name, of the $3 million my father had left me shielded from her greed, and I thought of the letter, his apology, inked with regret, but also with hope. Don't waste it on anger. A slow smile spread across my face. Let them laugh. Let them dream about convertibles and ocean views. Soon enough, they would learn that the ground beneath their dreams was made of sand. I slipped quietly into my room and pulled the suitcase from beneath my bed. My clothes were folded, neatly waiting. I ran my hand over the zipper, steadying my breath. I wasn't afraid anymore. Monica believed she was about to win the final battle. But what she didn't know was that I had already packed. Not in defeat, not in surrender, but in preparation for the moment when silence would finally speak louder than all of her cruel words. The day was coming and I was ready. The morning of the reckoning came on a Sunday, bright and deceptively calm. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, glinting off the packed suitcases Monica had shoved into the hallway. My suitcase was among them, tossed carelessly like a piece of trash. I walked down the stairs slowly, every step echoing in the silence of the house. Monica stood in the center of the living room, arms crossed, a smile tugging at her lips. Alex lounged on the sofa, tossing a basketball in the air while Sophie scrolled lazily on her phone. "Well, look who finally decided to join us," Monica said, her tone sickeningly sweet. She gestured toward the suitcases. "Pack your things, Emma. The house has been sold. We don't need you dragging your feet around here any longer." Alex chuckled. "Don't slam the door on your way out." Sophie barely looked up, muttering, "Bye, loser." I stood still, letting the moment hang between us. For years, I had pictured this scene being pushed out of my own home, powerless to fight back. But the weight in my chest wasn't fear anymore. It was something colder, stronger. I set my bag down gently, my voice calm. I had already packed. Monica's eyes gleamed with triumph. "Good. At least you're smart enough not to fight this. Saves us all time." I let the faintest smile curl at the corner of my lips. "But the things in those boxes," I said, steadying my gaze on hers, "they're not mine." For the first time, Monica's expression faltered, her arms uncrossed slightly. "What are you talking about?" I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a leather folder. The room seemed to shrink as I laid it open on the coffee table. The purchase contract, the deed, the transfer records, all bearing my name, Emer Collins. Monica blinked, confusion flashing into disbelief. She grabbed the papers, flipping through them frantically. "No, this is impossible. You couldn't afford this. You're a broke college girl. This has to be fake." Her voice cracked, trembling now. Alex sat up straight, the basketball slipping from his hands. What is this?" Sophie's phone clattered to the floor. "Emma, are you serious?" I looked directly at Monica, my voice steady, almost cold. "The buyer of this house was me. You were so busy planning your new life in Silver Coast that you never thought to ask who was on the other side of the deal. It was me the whole time." Monica's face flushed scarlet, her hands shaking as she slammed the folder shut. "You think you can outsmart me, Alsu? I'll take this to court. You'll lose everything." I leaned forward, my tone quiet but razor sharp. "Every signature is legal, every document airtight. My father's attorney handled the trust he left me, the same attorney who finalized this purchase. Do you really think you can beat him?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Monica's lips quivered, but no words came out. Alex muttered a curse under his breath, while Sophie started crying softly, covering her face with her hands. I rose to my feet, picking up the folder and sliding it back into my coat. "You have 3 days," I said firmly. 3 days to leave this house. After that, I'll have my lawyer handle the rest." Monica stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Not the timid girl she had controlled for years, but someone stronger, someone untouchable. For once she had nothing to say. And for the first time in my life, I realized silence could be louder than any scream. The room didn't stay silent for long. Monica's face twisted into something ugly, the mask of control peeling away. She threw the folder back onto the table so hard the papers scattered across the floor. "You think this makes you powerful, Emma?" She spat, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You're still that pathetic little girl who used to hide in her room. Money doesn't change what you are." Her words landed like blows, but they didn't pierce the way they once would have. I met her glare calmly. "No, Monica," I said evenly. "Money doesn't change me. It exposes you." Alex jumped to his feet, his fists clenched, his voice rising. "This is a joke. You can't just kick us out. My mom owns this house. She's always owned it." I lifted the deed steady in my hand. "Not anymore. The law says otherwise. I own it now, and you have 3 days. Sophie, for once, wasn't smirking. She wiped at her cheeks, her voice trembling. "Emma, please, can't you give us more time? We don't have anywhere else to go. Just a couple more weeks." Her desperation tugged faintly at me, but I remembered her sneers, her cruel little comments that mirrored her mother's venom. Sympathy flickered, then faded. 3 days, I repeated firmly. Monica stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "Do you hear me? I'll ruin you. I'll drag you through court until you're broke and begging. You think this house will make you happy? It'll bury you." I straightened my shoulders, keeping my voice cool. "Then go ahead, try. But remember, my father prepared for this. The lawyer who handled his estate also handled this purchase. Every detail is airtight. You don't stand a chance." Her face drained of color. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in her eyes. She stepped back, almost stumbling, and turned away, muttering curses under her breath. Alex kicked the coffee table, the crash echoing through the house. "This isn't over," he growled, his bravado cracking into something almost childish. "We'll find a way back. You'll see." Sophie just sobbed quietly, curling into herself on the sofa. I bent down, gathered the scattered documents, and tucked them neatly back into the folder. My hands didn't shake. Not this time. I looked at them all. Monica with her fading arrogance, Alex with his empty threats, Sophie with her crocodile tears, and I realized something profound. For years they had thrived on my silence, mistaking it for weakness. But now silence was my weapon. It gave me control. 3 days, I repeated one last time. After that, I called the police. "This is my house now, not yours, not anymore." I turned and walked toward the staircase, leaving them in stunned silence. Behind me, Monica's whispers turned frantic, almost incoherent. Alex paced like a caged animal. Sophie cried into her hands, but I didn't waver. For the first time in years, the house felt lighter. The walls didn't close in on me. I wasn't the unwanted shadow anymore. I was the owner. And though I felt no triumph, no giddy sense of victory, there was a deep, steady peace in my chest. They would leave. And when they did, this house would finally be mine. Not just on paper, but in truth. 3 days later, the house was quiet in a way it hadn't been in years. The suitcases that once blocked the hallway were gone. No more Monica's shrill commands echoing from the kitchen. No more Alex's heavy footsteps stomping up the stairs. No more Sophie's dramatic sighs when she wanted attention. They left in silence. No dramatic farewell, no apologies, not even a slammed door. A neighbor later told me they'd piled into a rented van just before dawn. Their faces pale, their movements hurried. For all their arrogance, they slipped away like shadows. When I walked into the empty living room that morning, sunlight streamed across the floorboards, warming the space. It felt different, lighter. For the first time, I could breathe. But standing there, surrounded by the ghost of memories, I realized the house was still heavy with history. The walls held echoes of my mother's laughter, my father's absence, Monica's cruelty, and my own silent endurance. It wasn't enough to simply own it. I had to reclaim it. That evening, I called my grandparents. "Come stay with me." I said, my voice trembling with both fear and hope. "This house, it's ours now. I don't want to live here alone. I want to make it into something better." a place we can all belong. There was a pause, and then my grandmother's warm voice answered. "Emma, are you sure I've never been more sure?" I whispered. A week later, their car pulled into the driveway. I ran out to greet them, tears stinging my eyes, as my grandfather lifted a box from the trunk and my grandmother held a pot of daisies she'd carried all the way from their cottage. Inside, we began the slow, careful work of transformation. My grandfather, though his back ached, rolled up his sleeves to mend the broken fence in the backyard. My grandmother filled the kitchen with the scent of cinnamon rolls and freshly brewed coffee. We scrubbed the walls, repainted rooms, and pulled weeds from the neglected garden. The daisies bloomed again, just as they had when my mother planted them years ago. Seeing them sway in the breeze, I felt as though I was finally breathing in sunlight instead of shadows. Every corner of the house shifted. The dining room, once a stage for Monica's sneers, now rang with laughter as my grandparents and I shared simple meals. The living room, stripped of Monica's polished photographs, now held pictures of my mother, my father, and even me, smiling genuinely, not forced into the margins. At night, I often sat by the window with my father's letter in my hands. I read it over and over, not out of bitterness, but as a reminder. He had failed me in many ways, but in the end, he had tried to protect me. His trust fund, the second house, the chance to reclaim my place. These were his silent apologies, and though I wasn't sure I could forgive everything, I had made peace with the man he was. As weeks turned into months, the house grew warmer, alive again. My grandmother tended roses along the fence. My grandfather built a small trellis for grapes in the backyard. And I, finally free from Monica's shadow, focused on my studies, knowing I had both roots and wings. One evening, as we sat in the garden under soft string lights, my grandmother squeezed my hand. "Your father gave you the means," she said softly, "but you gave this house its heart back." I smiled, looking at the daisies swaying gently in the wind. For years, this house had been a prison, a place of silence and suffering. Now it was something else entirely, a home built not on greed, but on love and resilience. I didn't need Monica, Alex, or Sophie in my story anymore. I had my family, my strength, and a future my father had believed I deserved. And as the stars flickered awake above us, I finally knew I wasn't just surviving. I was home.